So I've been trying to figure out how I want to word this because the difficulty with a game like this is people have a tendency to compare it with so many different things. And of course, on its own merits, I fucking think this game is worth a damn. Every single penny of it. When I consider the fact that so many games now, at least here in Australia, are looking at being priced from a premium level at the $110, $120 mark, when we look at a lot of the Sony games and a lot of the Xbox games that are going to be coming out over the course of the next couple of years. And this game is only asking for $69.95, $70. It's kind of a huge difference in cost, and I think there's a lot that goes into the cost. And I think on its own merits, this game offers a lot. The problem is it depends on the type of player you are. And the reality is, if you're someone who's looking at combat, something that's really heavy in its combat or really kind of refined, you're not going to get that. Vice versa, also with the platforming, there aren't a lot of hugely deep mechanics here. And if you are a familiar gamer, if you've been playing games like I have for quite some time, a lot of the things that you will have, the things that you experience will pretty much be the same thing that you would have experienced in previous games. One of the difficulties I have with a product like this produced by Microsoft and Xbox and made by Compulsion Games is, where does it, who's it made for? Who's the target demographic? And a part of me wants to say that the style of game and the style of storytelling that's more akin to a Grimm Brothers tale or a lot of the old classic stories that we or people would have read back in like the 1900s. It oozes a lot of that type of style as well as that kind of structure of storytelling. And there's a lot here. South of Midnight is a mature 17 plus rated game. And it reads like that. There's a lot of things in here that are very deep thematic themes and really tough kind of themes to struggle with that I think most kids are really not going to understand. And they're quite confronting. But in some regards, it feels like it's perfect for that, in my opinion, if it's a mature 12, 13-year-old at that right age to kind of start dealing with a lot of these lessons. The main crux of the game is you're playing as Hazel. She is about to basically pack her bags with the help of her mom, Lacey, who are essentially trying to escape a hurricane that's about to kind of hit the town of Prospero. And during this whole kind of packing and like the kind of kerfuffle of trying to leave the house, she's obviously asked to kind of check on some of the people in her little community where they live. And sure enough, after, having a fight with her mom, because there's this dispute that the two of them have, this tension, because her mom, Lacey, who's a kind of like a council worker, is doing many long hours. So Hazel doesn't really get to spend a lot of time with her mom. And during the hurricane, as Hazel has kind of gone off to kind of check on some of the people in her little camper site, their house ends up just getting swept away. And the journey begins where Hazel's basically off trying to rescue her mother. And that's kind of the focus for Hazel. That is the thing, the driving kind of crux for her character, is her trying to find her mom, rescue her mom. And along this journey, you start to not only uncover secrets of the town, but you also kind of get chosen by gods above, or the I guess nature itself, has decided that she is going to be selected as the Weaver. Now, what is a Weaver? A Weaver is someone who, using specific weaving tools, have the ability to kind of affect the tapestry of life itself. So there's this hidden kind of grand tapestry that exists within this realm, or within the story itself, that lives in everything, and it kind of combines everything, but it gets affected based on people's kind of emotional state. So if there is a lot of trauma in people, or if there is a lot of kind of repressed emotions, all of that has an effect on the tapestry and can leave a drastic mark. So there's a lot of emotional kind of weight that can be left in the grand tapestry, and if there's kind of any repressed emotions or feelings that are left unattended to and are not dealt with on a natural organic level, then it draws the attention of the stigma and brings in these monsters called the Haint, which the Weavers are obviously able to fight and defeat and kind of help mend those knots, those emotional knots, or those repressed emotions and feelings. And so Hazel, basically off on this journey to save her mother, gets chosen by the Grand Tapestry to become the next Weaver. She finds her weaving tools that have been held by her grandmother, Bunny, who you learn is kind of a major pulling point and kind of the antagonist in a sense. It's an interesting story because there's no real antagonist per se. It isn't that kind of story where it's very much good versus evil. It's more a journey of a character having to mend the world and mend the people around her. I think this is where some people will probably find that when they get to the end of the game, it's not going to have this hard, conclusive kind of grand ending. There isn't this massive boss battle, because a lot of what the game is focused on is the storytelling. And a lot of the storytelling is told through the environment. A lot of the storytelling is kind of you being immersed in the town of Prospero and its surrounding kind of history of the people that have lived there over many generations, where you learn about the previous Weaver and some of the work that she did, Mahalia, and how she helped a lot of the slaves in the area. You learn about just the general kind of treatment of the people, obviously, of the kind of black slavery within the township itself or within the community itself. It's a lot of tough themes. There's a lot of it is obviously dealing with a character that, being a healer, she's not necessarily an aggressive character. Nothing that she does is on the battling hero. No, she's just going, and while trying to find her mother, is learning how to use her powers to mend all the pain and sorrow that has manifested in this town, that has been almost kind of brought to life by this initial storm. The kind of grandness that the story kind of just unfolds, it doesn't necessarily have a bunch of characters that kind of all interconnect and then feel like they're all working towards trying to destroy some evil, villainous character in the back. No, it is just learning about people's pain and how all the different various types of pain that is suppressed, what effect that has, and how it can manifest into different types of monsters or different types of creatures or different types of hate and sorrow and pain and anguish. There's so much love and attention put into this world, into these characters, into this story, that Hazel herself, being kind of your protagonist that is going through her journey allows you to kind of view through her eyes and her level of awareness of everything that's happening in the town and everything that's happening in her community, because she's been so focused on herself from the very beginning of the game, having to, only think about her interests of, wanting to get into sports and running and just wanting the attention of her mother, who's already so invested in the pain and the sorrow of the community. Hazel, through her journey of trying to save her mother, now is forced to be brought to light to the problems of Prospero. It's a wonderful journey. It's a wonderful story. And for me, the ending to this game is just so impactful and so powerful. And it does it in such a way that I think people probably would miscredit, because it just doesn't have the same gut punch where you're expecting this big climax and it never really delivers that climax, because it's something far more deeper and far more intelligent on an emotional level. And it's brilliant. And I think most people who have that kind of interest, anyone that is wanting this type of mature piece of storytelling in a fable-like, old classic fable-like storytelling, will really get a kick out of it. And I think it's really worth the money and the detail to the world that they put in small little chunks. Like there are things even from the very beginning of the game where they kind of point out some of the major points that will happen later in the game. There is like a moment where Hazel walks into one of her neighbors' homes, and there are these 4 figurines, and they're basically the same figures that she is going to encounter and help in this journey. And it's all these little like callbacks, the placements within the story, the subtle symbology that's used, that I think is very empowering in this type of story, that a lot of people who are just looking for a pure action game are going to miss out. So I think if you're someone who is looking for a Devil May Cry type of game and just wants to kind of just fly through the story and just enjoy the action, you're going to miss out on so much, and it's probably not for you. And this is kind of, I think, my problem, or my, not even a problem, but my curiosity to the developers is, who's this for? Because again, the structure of the game on a mechanical level is quite simple. There is nothing complex. All the mechanics don't really kind of build to something that is challenging and rewarding on a gameplay standpoint. But I think it's probably because that's not the focus. The focus here is really on the journey that Hazel is going on and what she learns while trying to focus on her task of finding her mother. That is probably where I wonder whether people will get the same value out of this type of product. So if you're here for the story and you want this type of experience, absolutely go buy this game, go play it. If you've got Xbox Game Pass, spend the time and immerse yourself in this amazing tale, and it's all the little stories that are there because they are so emotionally driven. It's no surprise. I was thinking about the fact that a lot of the themes in this game is dealing with repressed emotions and kind of bringing those emotions to light. Hazel is a character that is a weaver. She is using her weaving abilities to look at people's emotional knots. They're using symbology of people's emotions being bottled up, where she will need to collect those emotions and bring them to light and almost kind of repair the knots within the grand tapestry, the fabric itself. It's almost ironic that this game, from a thematic standpoint, follows right after Compulsion's previous game, We Happy Few, that deals with, again, the idea of suppressing emotions but using medication to do so. And this just does it in a more, instead of you trying to uncover what people have suppressed using pills and trying to escape from this crazy suppressed world, this is all about bringing all those oppressed emotions and suppressed emotions to light. It's beautiful. It is stunning. It is well worth a trip down this Alice in Wonderland-like tale. Now, mechanically, of course, this is, I think, where, on a fundamental level, and I say this with some appreciation to the developers, because again, it is one of those things that when you look at it realistically, this is the first time that they are attempting this style of game. When we look at this game mechanically, again, if you compare it to most other games, it's not necessarily going to be overly complex. There isn't a whole lot there that, you know, we haven't seen before and we haven't seen done better in other games. So a large portion of it is you very much running around, finding, you'll have platforming and you'll have some puzzle elements within the game itself that you will, as a weaver, as you progress through the story, you uncover new abilities and new kind of powers, which are kind of collected through some of these previous memories. And these abilities not only work in some of the platforming sequences where you might have to traverse across certain gaps by kind of using your hooks to pull yourself over like large chasms or rivers that you need to cross, or you might need to grab onto rocks and throw them at mushrooms, which this game is obsessed with giving you mushrooms that are just in your way, trying to just ruin your day. Occasionally you might do some wall running. Occasionally there'll be areas where you have to kind of do like large double jumps or hover even. And then we get into the combat, where we get into these arena type matches, where you have your enemies, you have your dodges. Now, if you time the dodges, you can do a bit of damage to the enemies and allow them to be stunned. Obviously, when they hit you, they obviously hit hard. And then we start kind of getting into combat, where you've got your basic kind of attacks. You have the ability to kind of charge an attack. And then you've got your jump attacks, which, as you might see, not really well timed, also do a little bit of damage. Now, when they die, you have the ability to kind of go up to them and unravel them with your hooks, which give you a little bit of health. Very nice. So yeah, most of these combat scenarios are obviously filled in these small arenas where you're dealing with various types of enemies. You've got like your standard kind of enemies. You've got ones that shoot from a distance. You get ones that will leave these pusses on the ground that will throw out little explosive bugs. And then you get your brutes and a few other types, which there isn't a huge variety in, you know, other type of combat games where there's so much kind of depth to the combat. And this is where I think for someone who is just looking for a fun story with some basic gameplay, it is serviceable. I think it is more than serviceable. It's more than fine for the fact that it is far more focused on the storytelling. You then get all these extra little abilities that you can do on the enemies, where you can essentially pull them towards you to attack. You can even do pushes. You can kind of mix these up at the same time, which is nice. And if you get really annoyed with them, you can stun them, as well as the ability to control them, which help you in combat. And these obviously all unlock as you progress. You'll find little things in the environment while you're kind of platforming and exploring that allow you to gain points to level up your character and strengthen her combos. Again, there isn't a lot of depth here. It is kind of on that simplistic platforming side of things. It is very much a linear style game with some optional offside shoots that will give you either lore within the area that you're exploring, or they will give you points towards upgrading your character. And for the most part, it's really easy to find. There are some things that you might obviously have to look a little harder. I wasn't able to get everything, but I got a decent chunk, so I was able to see as much of the game had to offer. Mechanically, the game is what it is. It's a simple type of action adventure platformer, and comparing it when you are someone who's played many games to other previous games is obviously going to be a contentious point, because it doesn't do anything in a super unique way. There isn't a point in the game that you kind of go, oh my god, wow, that was fantastic. I've never seen that done before. That is such a in-depth moment in the game. There are certainly some fun boss battles and some interesting boss battles that they play with, but overall they're serviceable. Mechanically, the game does what it needs to, and it does it well. I think it actually plays on its kind of platforming strengths relatively well for a regular user or a regular game player, someone who only plays these types of games on the odd occasion and is not necessarily looking for a heavy challenge, or someone who's looking for the kind of deeper platforming chops. And I think that's fine. I mean, you've got games like Devil May Cry that don't necessarily have... Devil May Cry is one of those games that doesn't necessarily have much platforming, but it excels on the combat side of things. And then you get something like Prince of Persia that excels more on the platforming side of the game, and the combat is kind of secondary. It's like the least impressive part of it until you get to like Warrior Within, depending on your choice of preference. And I think this game strikes a nice balance for most people. But again, if you're someone who's looking for a hardcore game, it's not going to give you much depth. But the story, guys, the story here is actually really well told. Now, I will say, I had listened to Mr. Matty Plays talk about this game, and it was interesting hearing someone talk about the progress of the story in how it feels like there's all these moments and it doesn't really give you the conclusive ending and this final build-up at the very end. It just ends. And I will agree that the ending itself isn't tastefully, from a developer standpoint, wrapped up in a pleasant way. It's almost like, instead of giving it an extra minute of just pulling back the camera and letting the characters kind of just go off into the sunset in some form of fashion, it really just has an ending, and that's it. But the actual, before that conclusion, the ending itself, I think is, and everything leading up to it, I think is so impactful and has all these powerful moments within the story and all its characters and lore. For someone who's probably used to the type of storytelling where every character that is introduced has a purpose, has a meaning, and then plays a bigger part in a conclusive ending, this isn't that story. This is very much like an Alice in Wonderland off on the journey. It's almost similar to a lot of the Jim Henson type stories, whether it's like a Labyrinth or like the Dark Crystal. It's meant to be a focused character arc for Hazel and her discovery, not just in maturity and like emotional maturity within her community, but also an appreciation for the fact that she lives a much better life than a lot of the people who didn't have a lot of that same love in the town, in its history, in its culture. I think anyone that bashes this game, even for having Sweet Baby Inc. getting involved, is an idiot. And I think you're overlooking the fact that there is still so much love and passion and thoughtfulness to the storytelling, and to sit there and say that it is just downtrodden. Let me reword this. I think if you're the kind of person that doesn't have an appreciation to play a black character in this type of story where you're dealing with racism and dealing with abuse of various natures, really consider the type of personality that you are and what good you have within the community around you, because you don't set a good example. And I think this game should be appreciated and played by so many people of a younger generation as well as older, to have another viewpoint of what it's like to live in that type of community, in that type of culture. Like there is so much culture and love coming out of this game, and I want people to experience it. And this is where, honestly, despite its basic gameplay, again, everything that you experience and play, though it might not necessarily be as tight as a Mario, it might not have the same flexibility in combat or depth of combat like a God of War, I think the gameplay is serviceable enough to bring the focus of the game, which is the story. And fuck yeah, it's worth a damn. Play it. Spend your money. If you love storytelling, if you love something that's very different, because this type of storytelling we don't get very often. We're so inundated with superheroes and heroes in general who are off saving the world and being in these grandiose kind of experiences, that this feels a lot more grounded, down to earth. It feels like a true fable. I just want people to experience it. It's worth a damn. Buy it. It's $70. You're gonna be spending 120 on Doom, for Christ's sakes. Yeah. It's worth a damn.